Welcome to my session, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Past Summit. My name is Ray Kim, and this is my session, which I entitled, what'd you just say? And what I'm going to talk about today is how to speak the language of technology to people who do not understand technology. So before we get started here, I'll start with the public service announcements that you've been seeing all week long. Please silence your cell phones. As a matter of fact, that actually goes for me too, so I'm going to silence mine as well. And I'll probably keep this here because my cell phone also doubles as my clock, so I got to keep an eye on that. Other public service announcements. Everybody here, most of you I'm assuming is a past member. Actually, if you're attending Past Summit, most likely you are a past member. Past has opened a lot of opportunities for me personally. I've been a SQL Saturday speaker since 2015. As a matter of fact, this presentation you are about to see what actually was my very first SQL Saturday presentation. So I'm breaking a little bit of ground here, and I guess you can call this a milestone. But go check out Past's website, their online events, local user groups. SQL Saturday, like I said, I've been a SQL Saturday speaker for about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years now. And I'm also a member of a local user group. I'll talk about that a little more in a couple slides. So before we get started here, let me talk a little bit about the person that you see standing in front of the room here. I'll take a couple of slides to do that. My name is Ray Kim. Now, my title officially is developer. It's a little bit of a misnomer. I was originally hired to be a developer. What I really am for my company is a technical writer. I was told that one of the big reasons I was hired was that I have the ability to write, and I was told that that was a job function that was severely lacking in the company, in which they desperately needed. So they brought me on board a few years ago. I've been there ever since, and I'm still at it. So like I said, I've been a SQL Saturday speaker since 2015. I did my very first SQL Saturday in July 2015 in Albany, New York, which is where I'm from. I am a technical, like I said, technical communications professional. I do tech writing right now. I do content editing, documentation, whatnot. I do have a background with application development, object-oriented programming, and I do have some SQL Server. I have some experience with SQL Server. I am not a SQL MVP. I am not a SQL expert. I probably fall under the category of knows enough SQL to be dangerous. Maybe a better way to put it, I think, is knows enough SQL to be able to get the job done. Feel free to turn that any way you want. So another slide that describes who I am, some random useless facts about me. Like I said, I'm actually a technical writer, even though I've got developer in my title. I have degrees in computer science and technical communication. My friends who know me well are well aware that I bleed Syracuse orange. Go Orange. Football team's not doing so well. Hopefully the basketball team would do a little better. In my spare time, I'm a musician. I actually play 4 instruments. I play the piano, hence my Twitter handle and my blog address and all that. I also play three other instruments as well: clarinet, mallet percussion, and saxophone. This is what I do in my spare time. I'm a big sports fan. My personal sport that I follow the most is baseball. Yes, I admit it, I'm a Yankee fan. However, don't fret, Seattleites. The Seattle Mariners are actually my second favorite team. I have been known to schedule vacations around Major League Baseball schedules. No joke. And I realize I look more like a couch potato than an athlete, but I do CrossFit. I'm not very good at it, but I've been doing CrossFit for about 5 years. I've gotten a lot better than I used to be. And if you go to SQLServerCentral.com, you will notice all the forums. You'll notice the one that says anything that has nothing to do with SQL. Anybody ever go out to the SSC forums? If you ever go out there under that forum, you'll see one that's marked fantasy football. I am one of the people who plays fantasy football on SSC. As a matter of fact, I'm a 2-time champion of that league. Hopefully this year I'm gonna get 3, but we'll see what happens. I'm a lifelong upstate New Yorker. I currently live in Troy, New York. For those of you who don't know your way around New York, Troy is just outside Albany. Collectively, it's the capital district of New York State. We are about 2.5 hours, I guess, north of New York City, over on the eastern part of the state. Somebody asked me the other night if I was anywhere near Niagara Falls. I am not. Niagara Falls is all the way on the other side of the state, which is about 5 hours away. I am married. Our two kids have 4 legs and fur. So, and speaking of Albany, New York, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, for whatever reason you find yourself wandering around that part of the country, that part of the state, first of all, we do have a past chapter out there. I am one of the co-founders of this past chapter. The other 2 leaders, Ed Pollock and Greg Moore, are also here at Past Summit, so they've been floating around. I've been trying to track those guys down so the 3 of us could take a group selfie for our group. Hopefully that'll happen this morning. But our local past chapter is called CASUG, which stands for Capital Area SQL Server User Group. We do have a website. As a matter of fact, I'm the content editor for that website. Go check it out. We have a meeting coming up. We meet pretty much every second Monday of every month, except for December, which is when we hold our holiday party. We also host SQL Saturday. We have SQL Saturday in Albany. We usually hold it roughly at the end of July. So if you go to the SQL Saturday website and check the upcoming events coming up, you will usually see us out there. We're always looking for speakers. Email us, say, hey, I'd like to come speak at your meeting. We would love to have you. If you're in the neighborhood, we would prefer to have in-person speakers, but we do also accept remote speakers as well. So that's where you can find us. Also, I also wrote somebody had put in the community board outside looking for speaker. I did put our email address out there so you can get off of there as well. Okay, is that everything about here? Okay. Let's talk about this presentation, because you didn't come here to speak to me about myself or where I'm from. But hopefully by the end of this presentation, you're not going to look like that. We'll see what happens. I'll do my best to keep you awake. I know it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully everybody's had their coffee. I haven't had my Starbucks yet, but I had a couple of cups over breakfast. First of all, this is not a technology-specific presentation. I do about 5 or 6 SQL Saturday talks, and every single one of them is a professional development presentation. I like to tell people in terms of my relationship with PASS, think of me as being the professor at MIT who teaches English Lit. That's what I do. I do professional development presentations, of which you're about to see one of them. I do have some experience with teaching classes. I have taught part-time as an adjunct instructor. My personal MO when it comes to teaching is to sit in a group and we have a discussion where I'm facilitating the discussion. Now, standing in front of you, speaking here at Past Summit, that's kind of hard to do, so I'm probably going to be doing a lot of speaking at you. I don't like that either. I apologize for that, but I'll do my best to keep you guys engaged. And like I said, I promised that I was going to make this interactive, so we'll do the best we can there with that. Most of what you're about to see is based on personal experience. A lot of this is stuff that works for me and hopefully work for you too. You could have somebody else giving the same presentation and you could see a completely different presentation. So, like I said, I like interaction. By all means, feel free to ask me questions. Feel free to interrupt me. You have something to say, raise your hand, make your comment. I'll try to get you and address you and whatnot. But I like interactive presentations, so please, ask me questions, please. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about here. We're going to discuss the problem. We'll do a little illustration of the problem. We'll talk about knowing your audience. We're going to talk about documentation a little bit. Like I said, I'm a tech writer, so documentation is a big deal to me. We'll talk about the medium of communication. And we'll talk a little bit about what's in it for you. That's my game plan. There's a lot of other stuff that's way too much to fit into a 75-minute presentation, but we're going to do the best we can here. So, okay, let's get going here. Now, a little more background myself. I am a huge MASH fan. Okay? Anybody here watch MASH? Anybody else? All right, oh, a few. Anybody remember this episode called the Army-Navy game? Let me lay out the scenario. The camp is listening to the Army-Navy game, and a bomb falls, unexploded, right into the middle of the camp. I'll leave it at that. I won't discuss it anymore, but YouTube the episode. It's actually pretty funny. So what does this have to do with our subject here? Well, let me show you. Henry Blake is yelling over a megaphone telling how to disarm this bomb. So here's what happens. He tells Hawkeye and Trapper, carefully cut the wires leading to the fuse. So, okay, great. Trapper John cuts the wires. Snip, snip. After which Henry Blake comes in with, but first remove the fuse. How many of you come across that with instructions? Something similar to that. I mean, not this exact scenario, but frustration, right? Pretty frustrating. Yeah. So what happens when you have a technical concept, you're trying to explain it to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about the technology? And that person can be just about anybody. Doctors, lawyers, managers, coworkers, angry people calling the help desk. Right? How many of you run a help desk? Anybody in here? All right, there's one person back there. How many people have called the help desk? I expect a lot of people, fans will be up, my own included. Like I said, I promised some interaction, so let me ask you guys a question. Anybody have any horror stories to tell? Any horror stories to share? Anybody? Anybody? Any brave souls that want to speak up here? Like I said, I promised an interactive presentation, so. Nobody wants to talk this morning? It's too early in the morning? Nobody's had their coffee yet? Is that it? Okay. Does this thing even work? Yeah, it works. We'll probably use that a little more later on, but. All right. Illustrating the problem. You don't think professional development presentations don't have a demo? Well, guess what? This one has a demo, and you're about to see it right now. So here's how this demo is going to work. This is something that's called the tie demonstration. I call it the tie demonstration. Now, what this demonstration is all about, how many of you guys think that instructions are easy? Show of hands. Anybody? How many of you guys had managers who have said, after you've, say, developed an application, developed a bunch of T-SQL code, and your manager comes up and says, oh, okay, that's no problem. We can just write up the documentation in just 5 minutes, right? No problem. How many of you guys have had that happen? Let me tell you something. That is a huge, 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 huge pet peeve with me. I actually have an entire presentation where I just talk about documentation and technical writing. Obviously, I'm not doing that today. If you ever make it to one of my SQL Saturdays where I'm giving that, come on down, check it out. But instructions are not easy, and I actually have a demo that demonstrates that instructions are not easy. So here's how this demo is going to work. I have here a tie, and I need to volunteer. And I would like for the volunteer to be somebody who does not know how to tie a tie. So come on up. Come on up to the front of the room. So here's what's going to happen. First of all, what's your name?
Sharon.
Sharon. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you this tie, all right? So the way this is going to work is our volunteer is going to show us how to put the tie on. All right, so go ahead and put it on. I'm going to sit back here and see what happens. Go ahead and stand, show everybody else how you do it. Now keep in mind, folks, she does not know how to do this. So let's give her a few minutes and let's see what happens here. So Sharon, you're on. Let's see what happens. And by the way, you folks are not off the hook yet. Having a little trouble there? Okay, here's what's gonna happen. Step 2. Like I said, the rest of you folks are not out of the woods. Here's how you guys are gonna get involved. The rest of you are tech support. Here's what's gonna happen. She's gonna put the tie on, and you guys are gonna tell her how to do it. Let's take a few minutes and let's see what happens. All right, you guys ready? Go. Help her out. sorry.
You did step in front of the tube correctly. And then you created a loop there and you passed the large side through the loop, down through the top of the loop that you just created.
And where your thumb is. Your fingers are balanced.
This is hard.
You should probably start over and have the longer side a little longer than the short, the skinny side. You pull the longer, thick length down so that you a little more. There, that's probably a little better. And now somebody else there.
If you tried turning it off, turning it back on again.
I like that answer. Anybody else? Help her out. Keep talking here.
Bring a big piece around the back.
Start from the top, take the back side, feed it through the loop, and right here, feed it with your other hand.
Goes through the back. It goes around the back. No. Go back over. Go back over.
By the way, I forgot to mention that once we're all done, we're gonna have a discussion about this. So keep going. Let's see how this goes.
You have to wrap the back part all the way around. Come up through the center. So cross, come up through the center.
Steps 1 and 2.
Inside, as we did before.
Up underneath.
In the
I'm
middle.
so dumb at this.
Over there.
Yep, now come all the way around.
Go around. Like you tried to do earlier. Yep. Go through the back.
Yep.
Yep.
Now come around your hand, around the back side of your hand.
Nope. There you go.
Now down through the loop. that your
Down to the
fingers
loop
are-
that you just created.
There you go. Pull it tight. Not too tight though, pull it down.
I think you put it through the hole. Not that you just created.
Wait.
I just say that's my style.
Yeah. What do you guys think? How'd you do? All right. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. Thank you for being my guinea pig this morning. All right. Yeah. I could, but I'm not going to do that right now. That's not the point. Let's talk about what we just saw. First of all, Sharon, thank you very much for helping us out. So tell me, I'll give you the mic for right now. How'd that make you feel?
Stupid.
Stupid. All right, that's a good answer. Anything else?
I felt frustrated
Frustra-
that I couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Okay. All right. Yeah. No. Great buzzwords. Anything else?
I also felt that there was a communication breakdown between what they're telling me to do and how I could do it.
Yeah. No. There was a lot of that. Definitely. Is that it, or do you have anything else, or? Okay. So for those of you who gave the instructions, do you guys have anything to add? Anybody want to talk about how you felt? Who was the person? I think you gave the most instructions. Is it here?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me know your thoughts. I mean, give me some comments. What did you think?
It probably would have been helpful if we had spent a little bit more time coming up with a shared language for, what does it mean to bring it all the way around? Is that vertically, or is that horizontally, clockwise, counterclockwise?
Okay, yeah, it's a common set of instructions. That would have been great. Anybody else? Thank you. Anybody else? Hold on. Let me come down to you so we can hear you and get your voice in the recording here. Say that once again.
So if someone was available just to show her how to do it, instead of just having to look at the instructions and have 10 people yelling at her how to do it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And you also mentioned a demo. Demo would be helpful. I saw a hand up over here. You? Yep.
Frustration because I couldn't see the instructions as clearly, and I'm trying to translate something that I may not know fully.
Sure.
and I've got just enough of an idea.
Yeah, sure, definitely, by all means. Okay, great. Anybody else? Anybody else want to talk here? I'll tell you what, these are all great comments, and they're not unexpected. I mean, all these comments that I'm hearing are pretty typical of what I would expect from a demo like this. Frustration, anger, you just want to give up. So why do bosses insist on documentation in 5 minutes? Or documentation is not a big deal? I got news for them. Documentation is a big deal. Instructions are not easy. You just want to send them instructions, you think it's easy to put together in 5 minutes, guess what? It doesn't work that way. I think one of the biggest things you need to know first is to know your audience. What do they know? What don't they know? One of the big things about getting to know your audience is keep in mind that what you see may not necessarily be what your audience sees. I mean, the two of you could be looking at exactly the same thing and see two different things. Case in point, I think I asked this earlier. I apologize for asking again, but do we have any people who worked on the help desk or customer service? Okay, there's one over there. Imagine a situation where you are on the phone with somebody trying to get help. You two are looking at the same application, but you're on one end of the phone, this person's at the other. Are you two going to see exactly the same thing? You might, but chances are probably not. I mean, for all you know, the person on the other end might be using a different screen resolution, might be using a different browser, might have it sized differently or whatever. Maybe he's likes using all sorts of wacky colors. Maybe he's colorblind, who knows? The point is what you are looking at may not necessarily be what the other person is looking at. So that's something important you need to keep in mind. By the way, I looked at this illustration for like several minutes. I had to figure out how to do this. Oh, you just working. Uh-oh. Your experience is difficult. Please stand by. Uh-oh. Should I pick the mic up? Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, while we're doing that, I'm just going to keep using the mic here. So, empathy goes a long way. Empathy's a big deal. How many of you here were in Denise Mechner, however you pronounce her last name, her session yesterday about talking with customers? All right? Great session, right? I got to tell you something. I saw a lot of, oh, sorry. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. I saw a lot of overlap between her presentation yesterday and what I'm presenting to you here this morning. As a matter of fact, I went up to her afterwards, and I said to her, it's like, Denise, you could do my presentation. There's that much overlap, but empathy goes a long way. One of the things that made me successful when I first started into tech writer is I said to myself, what if I was the person who had to use these instructions? Put yourself in the client's shoes. That goes a long way in trying to help out, in trying to get you to communicate the language of technology. How do you feel when you talk with support? Somebody once said, it might have even, I'll say the golden rule. It's like, do unto others. It's like, you want to be treated a certain way? Well, you should be treating the customer the same way. How do you want to be treated? What does the client need? Ask questions designed to get a better answer. How often have you talked to somebody and said, okay, go click the, I don't know, let's say you click the red X on the screen, whatever it is, and the other person might say, I don't see a red X. You know, like I said, what you see may not be what they see. Ask questions that'll solicit answers from the other person so that you can get a better idea of what they're seeing. Like, for example, do you see a red X on the screen? If not, okay, well, how about menu items? Do you see anything there? And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So what kind of questions you ask can go a long way in trying to figure out what they do know or what they don't know. What do they see, hear, or sense? Again, we go back to, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but you know, it's all the same. all the same there. You want to make sure that you have a common frame of reference. You're looking at sort of the same thing. Keep it high level. How many of you guys have talked to other technicians where you try to get a question answered and they proceed to tell you everything there is to know about what it is they're working on? Right? Happen to you? I'll tell you what, it's one of the things that really pisses me off. Nothing gets me more than somebody saying, oh, what you're looking for is right there in the documentation. When I look at the documentation, it's this big, huge thing of black text. And the thing that I need to know is this one little sentence right in the middle of that black text. You seriously expect me to be able to find that? I used to have a boss whose favorite saying was, don't tell me how to build a clock, just tell me what time it is. The fact is, people don't care about detail. People want to know about the high level. I mean, it's great that you know everything there is to know about, say, database storage systems. But do people really need to know about the intricacies of SAN NAS and how disk storage systems work? Is there anybody in this room who does not know what KISS stands for? Okay, one person. So KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid. Always, 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 always keep it simple. Again, people don't want to know, don't need to know about detail. Leave the detail out. Don't even go there. Just keep it high level. If people want to know more about the detail, they'll come back to you later. Let them come back later. But that said, here's a funny thing, and the ironic thing is that keeping it simple is harder than you think it is. I mean, how often have you heard the term, if you really think you know something about the subject, try teaching it to a 6-year-old? Same principle. Keeping it simple is hard. Again, this is harder than you think. Respect your audience. Nobody likes somebody, a help desk, a help source, whatever, who's being condescending. You have a person on the other end of the phone line who doesn't know the technology and is trying to get help from you. Chances are they're going to be intimidated. How many of you guys get intimidated the first time you do something, anything, whatever it is, right? Show of hand. I would think that everybody's hand would be up, right? There are a lot of things that have been thrown in my lap at work, and I have no idea what the heck they're talking about. Immediately, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? How do I attack this thing? Where do I go? I have no idea. I'm uncomfortable. I mean, learning something new takes a level of discomfort. If you're trying to explain something technical, or trying to help somebody out, make them comfortable. Listen to what they say. Being an active listener is important. Those of you who were at Denise's session yesterday, you're hearing this for the second time. Listen. Active listening is a big deal. They may have something to say, and they may drop a hint that might help you to resolution. Don't ever talk down to them. Don't ever be condescending. I personally have no respect for that. If you're going to be condescending to me, then don't even talk to me. If you're trying to explain the concept to someone else, don't do the same thing to them either. Be patient. Be patient. I'll tell you what, how many times have you tried to explain a concept to somebody and you've had to explain it to them 2, 3, 4, 5 times before they finally get it? It takes a while for them to process information. So be wary that take time. It might take a lot of time. Again, people are intimidated. So be patient. Patience is a virtue, especially when you're talking about the language of technology. So any questions so far? Any questions, comments? How are we doing here? I'm just doing a quick check of time, see how we're doing here. Where are we supposed to go? It's 8:30 already. We're supposed to go to what, 9:15 here? Oh, question.
So, thinking about the demo we had at the time,
Here, I'll give you the mic so we can all hear you.
Thinking about the demo we had with the tie and my suggestion that it would probably have been helpful if we had spent some time building a common language. In my experience, sometimes if somebody asks you, hey, how do I tie a tie? And you start going into, okay, we'll discuss clockwise and counterclockwise, and this, you know, between the tie and your neck, and these are the different parts of the language
Right.
we're going to use. They're like, what are you talking about? I just wanted to know how to tie a tie.
Exactly. Exactly. There it is again. It's like, don't tell me how to build a clock. Just tell me what time it is. Keep it simple. Keep it high level.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we can't describe to them how to tie the tie.
Right. That's an interesting question. It's like, okay, there's a language barrier is basically what it is, right? If I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might help to boil it down to a language that they understand. I hate to use the word, for lack of a better phrase, I'm going to say baby talk. I don't know how else to describe that, but use words, phrases, sentences that you think they're going to understand. And it also might not help, again, ask questions. See if you can figure out what they know, figure out what they don't know. You might want to check on them saying, hey, do you get what I'm saying? Or is there anything else I need to explain to you with this thing? And once again, I'll say it again, it may take time. So be patient with that. So let's talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, documentation. So don't underestimate the power of documentation. I can get into a lot about documentation. As a matter of fact, like I said before, I have an entire presentation I do about documentation. So it's kind of hard to talk about documentation and boil it down into just a couple of slides, but we'll do the best we can here. Good documentation can save an awful lot of time, effort, and money. How often have you had questions averted or questions answered just because you had good documentation? All right? Yeah, a few hands there. Keep in mind there are different kinds of documentation. When I tell people I'm a technical writer, of course, the very first thing that pops in their mind is step-by-step instructions. Step A, step B, step C. There's a lot more kinds of documentation than just step-by-step. So you want to make sure that you're developing the right kind of documentation, the right tool for the job, the right product for what it is that you're trying to get across. Here's something that I like to push, especially on these managers who keep insisting that it only takes 5 minutes to do documentation. Documentation equals software development. Here's what I mean by that. There is absolutely no, like everybody in here knows about SDLC, right? Waterfall, the development life cycles. Let me let you in a secret. There actually is such a thing as a document development life cycle. Now, a little bit of a disclosure, I have actually worked in both an software application development shop, and I've also worked in a full-time technical writer shop. So I've worked on both formal documentation and formal software. The development life cycle in those two environments is identical. Each one, you come up with a concept. You got to plan it. You got to implement it. You have to test it. Yes, you have to test documentation. Show it to someone, give it to them, have them go, read this, try to follow this, and let me know if it works for you. That's testing. Documentation, just like software, you're going to have to make adjustments. All right? You have a beta version. You get it approved. You put it out to production. The software runs for a while. Documentation is used for a while. After a while, you're going to have to make adjustments. So you bring it back, you make another adjustment, cycle begins again. There is a documentation life cycle. If you know a manager who keeps insisting it only takes 5 minutes to do documentation, or they don't think documentation is important, explain that to them. Documentation is a big deal, and it is more work than they think. A lot more work. Reading is work. What was that I mentioned before about seeing this big, huge glob of text, right? Oh, by the way, did I mention that reading is work? I'm driving this home because it's a big deal. too many people do not understand that reading documentation, it takes effort to have to go through documentation. Case in point, well, before I'm getting ahead of myself here, you don't want to load documentation, overload it with detail. If it's a high-level documentation for like customers or managers or whatever, something that people need to understand looking at the big picture, keep it high level. Do not go into detail. It's great you know all that detail, but stay away from it. People are not interested. See my earlier note? Yeah, question.
I think one of the main features introduced this summit is like notebooks, like using SQL notebooks and stuff. Would you say that's a sufficient form of documentation? And would it be something you'd encourage to?
I'm going to answer that with your standard DBA answer. It depends. It depends on what you're using it for. It depends on the tool. It depends on the function. It depends on the purpose. There are lots of different types of documentation. There are lots of different tools out there. So see if you can use a tool that fits you or fits what you need or fits what you're looking to do. Usually my rule of thumb, let's talk for a minute specifically about writing step-by-step instructions, just as an example here. Usually the guideline that I like to use when I'm writing instructions is that if an instruction takes more than a few seconds for somebody to understand it, it's failed. And I got to go back and I got to rewrite it. Think about how long it takes for someone to read and comprehend what you're writing about. If it's something that needs to be understood quickly, make sure that they can read it and understand it quickly. Now, once again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier and say it depends on the kind of documentation. Because if you're writing, say, for example, a sysadmin guide where you have to include detail, all right, there you have no choice. You have to throw it in there. Not much you can do about that. But nevertheless, it still has to be understood, all right? If you want to talk more about that, like I said, come to my technical writing session sometime. So, before I go on, any questions? Anybody? Questions, comments, anything? All right. Let's talk about illustrations for a minute. You've all heard the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? All right? It really is. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through documentation and created a picture and said, okay, there's my answer right there. Everybody can just look at that. But here's the funny thing, though. There is a wrong way to use illustrations. If you don't use illustrations correctly, your illustration can be worth exactly 0 words. I think I put an example in the slide. Let me see what comes up. Okay, well, this is a good one. Examples are a good thing. I mean, you guys, most of us in here are BBAs. Everybody knows about the classic select statement, right? I forget where I pulled this up from. It was either W3 Schools or it was from Books Online. I forget which one. You know, example of a select statement. No, nice and easy. I look at that, I know right away what they're talking about. Analogies are a good thing too. Anybody know who Tom Lehrer is? I pulled that from there. I thought that was a great quote. It's an example of an analogy. Anybody in here know who Thomas Grosher is? He's a DBA out in the East Coast, rather, New York City area. I see him all the time at SQL Saturday. I once sat in on one of his presentations where he was talking about data storage systems. And most of what he's talking about went over my head. But I love Thomas. He's a good friend. He gives great presentations. And in his presentation about data storage systems, he used this analogy where he said, imagine, if you will, an elevator where 20 people get on, all 20 people pushes a different button, and the elevator has to go to each floor in the order that the button was pushed. As soon as he talked about that, all of a sudden the concept about what he was talking about was suddenly crystal clear. I knew exactly what he was talking about. So that was good. That was a great analogy. As a matter of fact, I love that so much, and now I'm using it here in my own presentation. Actually, let me go back for just a minute. Like I said, there is a wrong way to use illustrations. I worked for a former job, and by the way, there's a reason why this is now a former job. I had a president of a company who, number one, absolutely insisted on sending out a set of instructions in Microsoft Excel. Yeah, wrong tool for the job. Not only that, number two, he insisted on having an illustration on a different tab separate from his text. I see this guy with his hand in his face, and let me tell you something, when I saw this thing, I reacted exactly the same way. And number three, the illustration itself. I looked at the illustration, my first reaction was, what the heck is that? I had no idea, it was completely useless. I didn't know what it was. I mean, you think that's effective use of documentation? And by the way, there's a reason why I don't work for that company anymore. And this guy also insisted on sending this thing out to customers, so it was live. Nobody looked it over. He didn't want anybody to look it over. I kept insisting, this thing is crap. Stop sending this out. This is crap. He sent it out to customers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. By the way, like I said, I sent my resume out after seeing that. So did I see a question over here or no? Okay, I'm seeing things, which is entirely possible. How are we doing on time here? All right. Documentation should be informative yet efficient. Documentation, think of it this way, it's like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not very good. Right? Okay. Question so far? I just asked that, didn't I? Oh, in the back row here. Let's see if we can get you here. All right, let me hand you the mic here.
Good.
Yep.
So I'm writing documentation for DBAs, but my manager wants to write it as if a third grader can read it.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
How much time do you have? Unfortunately, I only have 75 minutes to do this presentation, so that's not a question I can answer easily. But the suggestions I would give you off the top of my head are some of the ones that I've already gone through. Like I said, keep it high level. Don't go into the detail. Just keep it at the high level. Don't drill down into the details about how, I don't know, I'll just throw an example out here, how this space is reallocated or something like that. They don't care about that. Just talk about the system uses this to reallocate the space. And leave it at that. I mean, if they want more detail, they can look it up later, or you can explain it later. See page whatever for more information about this. Does that answer that? Partially answer that? I could probably come up with a longer answer. I don't have time for it now, unfortunately. Come track me down later. Maybe we can discuss it more. Okay. By the way, another PSA, I am manning the storytelling and visualization table at the Birds of a Feather lunch, so you can feel free to come ask me questions there as well. So, all right, let's talk about the medium. Okay, what are we talking about when we're talking about the medium? I can see your future. All right, I can really see the future. I can read minds. The winning lottery numbers this weekend are, well, no, not really. So what do I talk about when I talk about the medium? Sometimes the communication medium matters. Years ago, there was an academic named Marshall McLuhan who had this quote. He said, "The medium is the message." Anybody ever hear of Marshall McLuhan? Any documentation people who are communications professionals? He was a Canadian academic and a Canadian communications researcher. The medium is the message. What the heck does that mean? Well, it means what medium you use can affect how the audience reacts. The example that I remember reading about was something as simple as, say, a light bulb. It doesn't really convey a message. All it does is just like gives off light, right? So how does that affect how people react? Let's say you have a dark room. You have a light bulb in the corner. Where are people more likely to congregate? In that corner where it's lit, right? That's an example of how the medium affects how people react. So here's some food for that. And we can take a little time to do a little discussion here. What exactly is the best medium? Or when is it appropriate to use certain medium? Yes, I realize this is a really vague question. Yes, I am aware of the standard DBA answer, it depends. So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, does anybody have any thoughts as to what kind of media do you use and where? Okay, let's start with you.
Well, for me, I think you have to know the person you're communicating with.
Okay.
Because their personality matters. Some people, you can effectively communicate with them through an email. Then if you go talk to them and they are not that friendly, you feel offended. But if you use an email or maybe a Slack or a Teams message, you can effectively communicate more than if you go talk to them face to face.
Okay, sure. Hey, anybody else have any other comments? I see a hand up over here somewhere. Or anybody? Any other? Okay, back there, a couple people there. Let me just walk back here, and I'll give you guys the mic. Okay, I'll start with you here.
But to take the other side of that, when you use words, you have no emotion. And sometimes the message gets lost because you can't see the importance. You can't communicate feelings or emotions, and LOL just doesn't cut it.
Right. And on top of that, too, sometimes what you write, certain things that you write may not be appropriate for whatever it is you're writing about. So, no, good answer. Anybody else? Right here.
I did a lot of time in customer service, and one of the first lessons that was taught to me is face-to-face is possible. Always do that first, and then move on to different types of communication to better communicate the ideas that you're trying to impart. Sure.
I personally think that face-to-face is always the best way to do things, and if it's doable, I think it should be the first line of defense, for lack of a better phrase. But if that's not possible, then there are probably other things you need to do. So yeah, no, great answer there. Anybody else? Anybody want to add anything to this? Okay, a couple more. I'll start with you here. Sorry.
It's kind of like face-to-face, but I know when I'm like calling someone for questions, I absolutely need to do a screen share because I think which I think is the closest thing you can do to face-to-face if you're in different cities or countries, because describing the problem versus do you see X? That's what I'm having issues with. It's
right.
So much easier.
Okay, I saw a couple more hands up over here, so I'm going to walk over here. You first?
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, if face-to-face, be sure to put it in writing, whatever it is you spoke with the customer with, because I know a lot of coworkers who just go on the phone and then they don't document what was spoken, and then no one else knows, what was exchanged.
Okay, I saw another hand over here. Good answer so far. Great discussion here. Go ahead.
I think it matters about the content.
Okay.
The content needs to match the medium and the response that you're looking for. I find it irritating to get a Teams message because that's more of an immediate thing when they could have just put that in an email and let me respond to it at my leisure.
Sure it is, by all means, definitely. How are we doing on time here? It's 10 of, let's do one more. Anybody else? Anybody else want to talk here? Okay, moving right along. This is great. Great discussion. I love hearing this. All right, so what do we have here? So what's in it for you? What do you get out of the ability to take a technical topic and explain to someone else non-technical? Those of you who were in Denise's presentation yesterday, you might be seeing a lot of this for the second time. So let's talk about some of the benefits of talking about non-techs. First of all, you're going to get a great reputation. Hey, look at such and such widget company. You know what? I talked to their technical support, and they were freaking awesome. I mean, they solved my problem in 5 minutes. They were friendly. I love talking to these guys. All right? Good customer service reputation. You want to know something? you get a good rep. People are going to come back. Cost and time savings. Time is money. How many of you have wasted time and or money because it took forever to get some kind of concept across? Anybody? A lot of hands, right? The better you can communicate, the better you can get the concept across, the more time and more money you're going to save. How about a better understanding of the material? Let me tell you a secret about what I've learned about being a technical writer. Anytime I write something about some subject, I will start learning about what it is that I'm writing about. Sometimes I have learned about something to the point where I actually became the subject matter expert, or SME. SME is actually an industry standard terms when you're talking to tech writers. You ask them about an SME, they'll know immediately what you're talking about. But before I get ahead here, show of hands, anybody in here have a blog? Okay, all right, one person. If you have something you want to learn, blog about it. Even if you don't know what you're talking about, just mention that I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is what I'm trying to learn. Let me let you in the secret too. It's like potential employers love seeing that. Hey, this person's trying. He wants to learn more about it. This person might be worth hiring. By the way, I have another presentation I do about blogging. Improving those around you. Rising tide lifts all boats. One of the things that I've discovered is that when I'm writing a document or when I'm trying to communicate a concept, I'm not just helping myself, I'm helping everybody around me. I'm helping my team. That's part of team chemistry, team cohesiveness, communicating with them, trying to illustrate concepts to your team. It can help your team. It can go a long way with helping your team. Increasing sales, again, the bottom line. If you have the ability to explain things simply in a way that people understand, again, people are going to come to you. They'll buy your product. They're going to say, what awesome reputation you guys have. And they're going to come back for more. Conflict avoidance. How many of you guys work in some kind of team where you have all sorts of conflict at work? I expect every hand to be up because it exists everybody. I mean, communication is hard, and a lot of things are lost in translation. I could talk to you about communication models and why things get lost, but again, we only have 75 minutes. So the better you can communicate, the more conflicts you can avoid. Anybody in here yesterday for, oh geez, I attended a session yesterday on making the leap to management. Anybody in that session yesterday? A couple of you. A lot of great points to that one. As a matter of fact, between that one and Denise's presentation, the common thread here is communication. I am a big believer that good communication will solve 90% of the world's problems. I believe that. I still believe that. I always will believe that. How about advancing your career? Hey, you know what? Bob Jones over here, he knows what he's talking about. He can explain things to you like this guy respects you. I mean, he treats you like you're an adult, and yet he can explain it to you like you're a 6-year-old, so you understand it immediately. That guy's probably going places, right? That could be you. Hopefully someday it'll be me. Let's see what happens. I mean, I'm still doing pretty well in my career, but we'll see where that goes from there. I don't know, did I miss anything else? What time is it here? Well, it's not even 9 o'clock yet. We're actually going to get this done in an hour. So, let's go over what we just talked about. See, the thing about this thing is I also have to adjust this presentation for like an hour, 75 minutes, depending on where I'm talking. Let's talk about what we just talked about here. Number one, instructions are harder than you think. If somebody is asking you to write a set of instructions and they tell you they need it in 5 minutes, tell them to stop and take a step back. Because it's a much, 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 much harder than I think it is. I don't have time for this right now because I can do an entire presentation about instructions. As a matter of fact, I have done an entire presentation about instructions. If you ever go to my blog, I have this thing about my presentations to see what I've talked about. Know your audience. Knowing who you're talking to can go a long way in terms of trying to figure out what you need to say, how you need to say it, and a number of other, probably some other communication issues that I probably haven't even thought of yet. If you guys have come up with any others, by all means, let me know. Maybe they'll make their way into the presentation. Keep it simple. Always, always, always keep it simple. Keep it high level. It's great that you know every little detail about the select statement. People don't want to hear about it. Be patient. It's going to take a while for you to be able to explain the concept to somebody else. It might take a long time. I mean, it could happen in as few as like 10 seconds. Maybe it'll take as long as a couple of days. How many of you, like, I'm assuming most of you in here, maybe not all of you, but most of you went to college. I mean, how many college courses have you taken that pretty much take weeks, months? Concepts are not easy. Documentation goes a long way, and if it's done correctly, it may answer a lot of questions before they're even asked. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Reading is work. If you are writing an admin guide, if you are reading a help menu, you're writing step-by-step instructions, you don't want it to read like something by Stephen King or Tom Clancy. You're not writing a novel. Don't bog it down. Keep it simple. Always remember that. I can't tell you how frustrated I get by all these technical people who do not understand that it takes effort to read something. There are people that still don't understand that. Even to this day, I go to work, I'm pounding this into people's heads. It's like, stop writing all the stuff. Just give me the facts. If you use illustrations properly and effectively, they can go a long way. Old saying is true. It's like a picture's worth 1,000 words. You could probably eliminate a lot of text just by showing an illustration. But keep in mind, it's got to be used properly. There is a wrong way to use illustrations. The medium is the message. Sometimes the medium that you use can go a long way in conveying whatever communication it is or whatever thought that it is that you're trying to get across. And I think that's about, yeah, that's about it. So, any questions? Yeah.
Would you have any specific recommendations for documenting like SQL tables, like what each table and column is for? We tried using a SQL, the Redgate SQL doc, but it was a bit cumbersome, I think, for...
Okay, first question for you is who's the audience? Who's going to be reading this?
I think pretty much all internal employees.
Okay, internal. Off the top of my head, and again, this is just off the top of my head, do you have a system like, say, a Confluence or a Wiki or something like that?
We do.
Try that. Try that. The great thing about a Wiki, I use Confluence at work, and I use it extensively. It's for internal personnel. It works like a wiki. Anybody can add to it, update it, and write in it. If you're a tech writer like I am, you can formalize it, you can structure it. A wiki or Confluence, I mean, limitless applications. A lot of things you can do with it, especially for internal documentation. Anybody else? Any other questions? Getting my exercise in today, that's for sure.
How do you handle when people don't want to use the documentation that you've written? So we have a wiki at work where we document a lot of stuff, but we find that people come straight to developers to ask questions instead of going to the documentation.
Oh boy. I'll tell you what, that's a good question. The proverbial saying, you can lead a horse to water, can't make him drink. First of all, make sure that they are aware that that documentation exists, number one. Number two, it's entirely possible that they, again, going back to that earlier discussion, maybe they just prefer face-to-face. That's entirely possible. Number three, if what you have isn't working, try something else. Maybe you can write it up in a memo or a Word document. instruction like that and see if that works for you. Again, there's only so much I can say in like 75 minutes. So, okay, another question over here.
Yeah, we tend to have that same issue, and I'm just wondering if that might be a clue that the documentation is harder to use than just going to a developer and asking the question, if we need to actually just simplify it even more.
Yeah, it could be. It could very well be. Again, documentation, treat documentation like software. Maybe you have to test it. Show it to someone and ask them, tell me how this works for you, or tell me if you can follow this, or do you have any feedback for me on what you do or don't like about this document? So elicit feedback. Sometimes part of the problem is whoever it is that wrote it has no idea that there's a problem with it. I'm a big believer that documentation needs to be handled like software. As a matter of fact, I actually work in a Agile and Scrum environment, and in our environment, the documentation is actually treated like software. No difference. So, yeah, question over here.
Actually, potential solution with some of my documentation earlier in my career. I found the documentation was fine. My search terms were crud.
Ah, okay. How many of you work on websites and have to deal with SEO? Any webmasters in here, web developers? All right. What's your experience with SEO? I mean, how do you handle stuff like that? What do you do with that?
I just try, and then if people don't like it, I try something else.
Trial and error. You know what? There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, sometimes you have to try different things. Plug something in. It's like, okay, let's see how this works. Again, there we go again. Working on documentation is just like working on software. No difference. Okay, another one right here.
And for us, it turned out that we needed to teach the people that are going straight to the developers, and we tell them, have you looked at this wiki? Have you read through the wiki? Because the developers say, well, I'm not going to help you till you've gone through the wiki. So sometimes it's a learning curve for some people that don't realize what the culture is.
Right. Okay. Okay. This is all great discussions. I'd go all day long with this if I could. Great discussion. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, all the way in the back. Give me a minute to walk all the way around here. I'll tell you what, I haven't been to a CrossFit gym all week. I'm getting my exercise in this week. Over there, that's right. So, I'll give you the mic here. Go ahead.
My team usually struggles with capacity, so even though it's great to have face-to-face communication, we just don't have the time for that. One recommendation was if people keep asking you, especially over email, just take your time in answering it. Don't answer it for a day. If they need it that bad, then they'll actually look at the documentation.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. Can I tell you how many times I've sent something over email, did not get a response back, and the person said, oh, I never read your email, or got buried. You want to know something, if email something works, maybe you got to try something else. So, great discussion, great answers so far. Anybody else? How are we doing time here? I know 3 hours. We still got time. I mean, I can keep talking for the next 10 minutes. All right, all the way in the back here. Let's see how many questions we can get in here. I mean, we got 10 minutes. We may as well use the time up here.
Yeah. So with the communication, understand what someone's telling you is obviously half of it. Do you have any tips, and I'm sorry I came in a little late, but was there any tips on how to maybe organize your inbox so that you can deal with things a little bit quicker? You got any tips around how you receive communication, especially electronic?
Well, here are a couple of thoughts right off the top of my head. Those of you who were in the session yesterday about making the leap into management will have heard this before. Maybe you shouldn't be using an inbox. I already forgot his name. This is killing me. But he had a great quote by Mark Cuban, who said, I just heard this yesterday, and I thought it was great, but he famously does not use email. The reason being, and I thought this is a great quote, is he said, email is their to-do list for you. Why is somebody else controlling your to-do list? So that's one thought off the top of my head. Maybe you should try something else. Email is not always effective. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to other colleagues, and I'll say, have you seen my email? And they'll say, no, I haven't. Anybody here use Slack at work? Slack or other communication systems, say Google Hangouts, right? If email doesn't work, there are all sorts of different options. Does that answer your question at all? Or? All right. Anybody else? We got plenty of time here, so may as well use it up. Anybody? Okay, right over there. All right, let me just hand you the mic. I apologize for running all over the place, but I want to make sure this all gets recorded.
I'll direct people to the information, the documentation, and tell them to come back and tell me how we can make it better. So it gets them to read it, gets them to think about it, and makes their documentation better.
There you go. That's feedback. That's feedback. That's documentation testing. All right, go back to the documentation life cycle. There's no difference between the document life cycle and the software life cycle. Same thing. I got to tell you something. One of the things I've talked about, and I actually wrote a blog article about this, is that documentation gets no respect whatsoever. I've even gone as far as to refer to it as being the Rodney Dangerfield of technical professions. No respect, no respect. So, by the way, in case you're wondering, in case anybody's interested, by the way, speaking of which, session evaluations, make sure you get those in. Tell me if you like what I had, what I presented. If I'm awful, let me know what I need to improve. Let me know. But anyway, I'm not really done. I'm just putting this up here for the information. If you want to get a hold of me, that's my link. Again, I'm a musician. That's where all my addresses come from. Piano, right? That's my LinkedIn address. I am okay with people connecting me with me on LinkedIn. However, if you are going to connect on LinkedIn, please let me know that you met me here or we spoke here, especially if I don't know you. If I don't know you and just send me a blank invitation to connect, guess what? I'm probably going to delete it. So please let me know you met me here if you want to connect on LinkedIn. There's my blog address. I update my blog pretty regularly. At least I try to. I mean, I haven't done it this week. I meant to, but haven't done it past summer. I will pick it up again when I get home. There's my Twitter account. I will warn you in advance, I am not on Twitter all that often. As a matter of fact, I only joined Twitter just this past July, and really the only reason why I joined Twitter is I found out as I was talking at Past Summit. And it's the communication of, Matt just walked into the room. He's laughing at me because he uses Twitter all the time. Matt, thanks a lot. You're the one of the people I blame for getting me in Twitter. By the way, Matt's a great speaker too. You got to go hear him speak sometime too. So before I finish, any other questions or discussion here? How much time do we have here? Anyway, we still have about 5 minutes. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay. If anybody has any other questions, I'll be around here the rest of the day. Feel free to flag me down. I am heading up the storytelling visualization table at the Birds of a Feather luncheon, so come sit with me if you like. We can discuss more stuff. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.